It is possible for an adult and a child to have a sexual relationship and for it to have positive outcomes on the child as well. On the child as well.
Shout out to the people in the comments of my previous video convincing me to do this. You're right, it would just be too bad faith not to tackle a specific point he made in his grand philosophical treatise on why you should like him and not think he's just some weirdo on the internet to be laughed at, because e-celebs are important, and even though their entire business is image and they're happy to make their living on image and people liking them, that element of their existence, the primary element of their existence, that's off topic for intellectual discussion. So folks, here we go. I'm sorry, one more little vid on Vaush. Today, we're going to talk about utilitarianism, or rather, Vaush's explanation of act versus rule utilitarianism. Now, this clip of his is my favorite. I adore it, because although it was snipped out of context, when the context is added, it doesn't get better, and then Vaush's new explanation of it makes it far, far worse. How so, you may wonder? We'll get to it. I'm thinking for this vid we do a play-by-play. Take it away, Irish laddie.
Before I can explain what was going on here, we have to finish the point that I was making, because this is a really nasty clip.
Okay, folks, open minds. A really nasty clip, so I'm thinking something where the meaning is totally warped, like this.
Guys, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm a pedophile. So with that in mind, it's obviously kid time.
Or maybe a single line snipped out of a broader statement where they're actually stating the opposite of what they thought, and adding context flips it back. So okay, what's the clip people have been sharing?
It is possible for an adult and a child to have a sexual relationship and for it to have positive outcomes on the child as well. That is possible.
Yeah, pretty bad. I'm going to need the context to be, just kidding, said immediately after, or something along those lines. You're going to need to negate that premise, not build on it.
However,
not actually the word you want to hear next. That's a connective you hear used a lot when people are saying, yes, the thing I just said is true. However, you know, it's really cold outside. However, I'm still going to have some ice cream. You're not saying it's not cold outside. If you haven't already seen this, might seem like a strange nitpick. It's not. It will become clear why later. So okay, carry on, Vaush. You could have just been saying, however, what I just said is a joke. I don't think that's true. Maybe that's what he said.
However, categorically, we discourage those relationships because as a rule, it is substantially more likely that enabling them would cause harm in society.
So, this context further confirms that he believes what he said is true, and that he is absolutely not talking hypothetically because he is discussing why people believe what they do. He is stating that the reason people in real life, quote, discourage adults having sex with children is because it's unlikely to have a positive outcome. So he does believe the outcome can be positive, just that it's unlikely to be.
That's the difference between act and rule utilitarianism.
Yeah, generally correct. Actually not a horrendous explanation, off the cuff on a stream. It's actually fine. This, as an explanation, isn't the problem. It's the premise that you assert is a fact. If you'd instead gone with, if someone drives through a red light, no one gets hurt, they get somewhere they needed to be sooner, that's a positive outcome. An act utilitarian would say, that was good. A rule utilitarian would say, that act is bad because it doesn't conform to a rule that overall results in the best outcomes. No one would have had a big problem with it. The philosophy isn't the problem here. That part, generally fine, he's right. Rule utilitarianism is essentially about overcoming the issue with consequentialism of uncertainty in outcome of an individual action. The problem is that his example of an act with an uncertain outcome is fucking a kid. This is going to blow your mind. This is an insane, crazy stance to take, I know, but many people, including myself, don't believe there is a possibility of a positive outcome to that. And certainly not, as Vaush said,
on the child as well.
Ooh, that's very specific about what kind of positive outcome, isn't it? Maybe that'll come back later. Anyway, back to the clip.
That's the difference between act and rule utilitarianism.
Yeah, more or less.
An act utilitarian would say, oh, this is an instance where it was good for the adult and the minor to have sex. That would make it a good action. But the rule utilitarian, which is what I am, would say, even though that individual outcome was good, the act was still bad because in general, in a broader application, for adults and children to have sex with one another leads to horribly destructive outcomes. For that reason, it is an unethical act.
That's the whole clip. That's what he provides as the full context. He thinks it's possible for adults to have sex with children, and for that to have a positive outcome on the child, but he thinks it's unlikely, so as a rule, we shouldn't, because he's a rule utilitarian. He does say he's against, as a rule, adults having sex with children, because there's only a small chance of it being good. My G, most people think that's fucking abhorrent. Keffels did this as well. Keffels had a defense video of Vaush, and included this context and left it at that, as if that clears everything up. It doesn't. That people don't recognize that this doesn't clear up what people found repulsive is concerning in and of itself. If not in terms of disgust and suspicion, then at least in terms of ignorance. There is at this point a long internet tradition of deontologists calling consequentialists pedos.
Yeah, look at that. Whoever cut this clip ended it right before I said, but. Really nasty work.
Oh, he said but. Well, he said however. So he doesn't mean what he just said. Oh! But then he went on to confirm that he did mean it, so... I'll try not to sound like a farcical cartoon, but I don't believe for a second that Vaush believes that when he said however in that clip, he was negating what he had just said. But I do believe that he believes that his audience will believe that he believes that if he says this. Hope you can follow what I'm saying. Good luck. If you can't, don't worry, he'll confirm what I'm saying in a minute or two.
And I clearly don't need the help making myself look terrible. So, all right. What's going on here? What point am I clearly failing to make?
This is the weirdest part of it, because he made the point all right. Like I said, for an off-the-cuff explanation during stream to illustrate the difference between act and rule utilitarianism, it's fine. He's going for the dum-dum deflection. Oh, people are just upset because I messed up the philosophy because I was just a small bean beginner YouTuber. That's not the problem. Now, my apologies for the upcoming boredom, but I'm going to let Vaush ramble, lest I be accused of bad faith in taking clips out of context.
And why did I say any of that terrible shit? What I'm trying to explain, poorly, mind you, is the difference between act and rule utilitarianism. They're two different ways of understanding what's right and what's wrong. At least that's what I thought back then. To understand what I was thinking at the time, I'm going to have to explain this in the context of my past self's, like sophomoric Dunning-Kruger-esque understanding of utilitarianism.
Blah, 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 blah. Oh, yes, you see, it's just all very technical, high-minded. It's all academic, you see. And I was a dum-dum. Let me talk and talk and talk so you forget what specifically I said.
We have to enter the very tiny shoes of my brain back then. We have to step into the shoes of my brain back then. And back then, as I understood it, act utilitarians decide if an action is moral by assessing the outcomes of that action, right? So you throw a brick at a person, it hits them, it hurts them, that's a bad outcome. Okay, so don't throw bricks at people. And rule utilitarians do this while also considering the value of broader judgments or rules that might consider an action moral or immoral by default, based on a general judgment of the expected outcomes. So we have rules against throwing bricks at people, not because the outcomes are always bad. I mean, you could miss, for example, and not really do much of anything.
Your Honor, I only tried to fuck that kid because I thought my cock would miss.
But we still have laws against that, because the expected outcome of throwing a brick at a person is bad, averaged out, and you want to prevent people from doing that thing generally, rather than just letting people hope that the individual outcome of a specific thrown brick might be good. Does that make sense?
Yep, more or less, V-Man. That's fine. That's not the problem people have with that clip at all. Thanks for wasting our time.
Well, again, none of this is a good understanding of utilitarianism, so I'm trying to explain how I thought about it. I know.
It's fine. This is like a parade of humility. Wait, is this like a weird kind of virtue signaling?
You'll have to read up on the subject elsewhere. Don't get your normative ethics lessons from me, please God. So let me continue with the distinction. In the, I guess, to keep with the theme of bricks,
Oh my God.
We would consider it morally wrong to toss cinder blocks off of a highway overpass. I think most people would agree that's bad.
Okay, here we go. We're marching towards relevance, having been given a massive amount of time to forget the specifics of what he said.
It's possible, however incredibly unlikely, that doing so might actually end in having a positive outcome. Maybe the cinder block, it goes through the windshield and it smashes the face of a kidnapper.
Yes. Dropping a cinder block off an overpass could just by chance stop a kidnapping attempt. That seems okay. That's possible. Could happen.
And the car crashes and the kidnappee is able to escape to safety, right? I mean, and that's a morally good outcome from the action, you know? So the question is then, is an action morally wrong if its expected outcome is overwhelmingly likely to be bad, but it somehow, just through sheer chance, ends up not being bad, you know?
Here we go, boy. Let's get to the specific example. Enough analogizing.
Is it morally wrong to drunkenly drive through the front doors of a school if the only person you hit is, by sheer coincidence, about to do a school shooting? No, I know. You have to understand these are the high IQ moral conundrums that only the smartest debate bro YouTubers can even hope to grapple with.
Oh yes, all these wacky hypotheticals. That I agree, technically could happen. Let's get to your specific example, please, because it's a bit different.
At any rate, in the full clip, I'm clearly siding with the rule utilitarian argument here, that all of these actions would be immoral regardless of outcome, you know, because categorically the harm is... We're engaging with my understanding at the time. I feel so bad. I know more about the subject now than I did then, so I feel like I'm re-explaining bad logic, but...
None of this matters, brother, and it's been several minutes. Spoilers, he finally gets into it now. Thanks for bearing with me.
Look, two things set me up to fail here. Well, one thing did, the thing being me, but I set myself up to fail in two ways.
All right, let's go. Let's hear it.
My aforementioned tendency to engage in pointlessly edgy contrarian, ooh, the normies won't like this one, bullshit hypotheticals.
If I'm going to be hyper-charitable, fair enough. He set himself to fail optically by touching the kind of example at all. Even if he didn't say something immensely creepy and suspicious to a mass audience, just that topic alone is a danger zone online. Not really the issue here, but okay, next.
And an extremely, extremely broad definition of can have good outcomes.
Vaush, the air quotes, you're quoting yourself, and you're quoting yourself out of context to mislead. The problem is, you didn't say that. That would have been extremely broad as it can be, but you narrowed it in an insane way. Here's a little reminder of what he actually said.
And for it to have positive outcomes on the child as well. On the child as well.
Vaush, I'm gonna need you to explain exactly what a positive outcome on the child is. Even hypothetically, what is a good outcome for the child if you were to fuck them? I'm really curious. I actually genuinely can't think of one. Maybe I'm stupid. Enlighten me.
Yeah, I've already addressed this debate bro brain poison before, so hopefully it's recognizable here, those tendencies, in the same way that it was with the child labor argument. I'm shooting myself in the foot in the exact same way with the same personality gun.
No, buddy. That child labor clip, the Dead Cells one, that's some Mott and Bailey action. But we're not doing that in this video.
The reason I hate this clip, the myself in this clip, most of all, is because this argument I was having with chat wasn't even about child sexual abuse. It wasn't relevant. It was completely irrelevant to the point that I was making. It's just shock value nonsense, you know?
Again, trying to generate the illusion that people's issue is with anything but what was specifically said. Oh, the problem was with my philosophical claims. Oh, the problem is just that it's a shocking topic. No, specifically what you said. And the way he's addressing it now, specifically how he quoted himself out of context, how he removed the most damning part, the on the child as well part of that quote, makes me think this fucker knows.
All I'm really doing is conveying an extremely intro to normative ethics understanding of consequentialism. You know, if you were an intro to normative ethics class, you'd probably get yelled at by the professor for attempting anything even like this argument. But yeah, leaving that aside.
Nice Reddit fantasy. Upvote to the left.
And because it's completely irrelevant, I can't even explain my thought process very well. It just looks terrible, even though in the full clip, I'm explicitly stating that child-adult sexual relationships are categorically wrong.
There's being charitable, and then there's being a schmuck. This is highly deceptive. First off, smaller point, the thing that he explicitly literally says is categorical is the discouragement of these relationships.
However, categorically, we discourage those relationships.
Cool, no problem. I'd say forbid instead of discourage perhaps, but okay. But his position on whether you should fuck a kid or not was never the issue. He said, as a rule, you shouldn't. No one should fuck a kid. I agree. Cool. The bit that's sus is that you think individual examples can have a good outcome.
The rule utilitarian, which is what I am, would say, even though that individual outcome was good, the act was still bad.
Many people think someone thinking that's possible is on its own horrible and suspicious, especially if you think it's possible for it to have a positive outcome.
On the child as well.
That is classic pedo rhetoric. Back when Todd Nickerson had his I'm a pedophile, you're the monsters articles up on Salon, I looked into those kind of people, and this is sort of what they say, and then they go, well, if society changed and things shifted though, this might change. Ooh, the odds of a bad outcome might change. We're just being intellectual. It's
a completely unforced error. I did this to myself. Also, with regards to can have good outcomes,
that's not the quote, Vaush. You've taken yourself out of context again, and the context is very fucking important here.
And for it to have positive outcomes on the child as well.
This is like a fridge temp IQ element of arguing normative ethics. If you're willing to argue like a fucking idiot, as I clearly am, literally anything can have a good outcome in some specific scenario.
I could see this working out if you'd actually said what you said and hadn't also said, again, I'll repeat,
on the child as well.
I don't see your made-up additional context fixing it, dog. Go on, give it your best shot.
Murdering an innocent person. Well, what if someone put a gun to your head and said they'd murder 2 innocent people if you didn't murder 1? Now murdering that person actually has a good outcome because with 2 possible paths, one in which 1 person dies, one in which 2 people die, you made the path where only 1 person dies, so you basically save the life of a person. Woo! There you go.
Oh, very clever. Would you call that a positive outcome on the person you shot and killed, though? Because that would make it analogous to what you actually said about sex with a child having a positive outcome on the child.
Nothing's inherently wrong, context. The asteroid hitting the planet would be bad. Well, what if it prevents it from hitting a bigger planet with more people? Child-adult sexual relations? Well, what if aliens threaten to blow up the whole planet, etc., etc.?
Yeah, those wacky hypotheticals. You said fucking a kid can have a positive outcome on that child. Explain it right now. There is no way in hell this is what you meant in that clip. Seems like you don't even have an example, at least not that you can share publicly and not look like a gigantic fucking pedophile.
I know. It actually is that stupid. It wasn't even the point I was trying to make. It's just that, nothing is inherently wrong. It depends on the outcomes style of faux intellectualism.
Is my man entirely rejecting consequentialism here? That's kind of based.
It was a pretty big feature of how I constructed arguments and made points back then, and here's it combining with that tendency to reach for the edgiest possible subjects and comparisons, and it really fucks me over. I know there are probably hundreds of examples of me doing this, but with murder or domestic abuse or any other just edgy topic dealing.
I guarantee he has never said murder can have positive outcomes for the person being murdered.
Oh, you normies in my chat, you think that anything is inherently wrong? Well, let me construct a hypothetical for you that you won't be able to grapple with. You see, because I'm smart, I know that actually, what if this thing happened?
At this point, this is a constructed fantasy about what occurred. This wasn't spitballing what-ifs. He wasn't bantering with his chat. He said something, and he clarified that he means it. His conclusion, on the back of what he believed, was that you shouldn't fuck kids. But he was definitely saying he believes in real life it can have a positive outcome. On the child. Key part. This wasn't like, you have to press a button. There are 2 buttons. One of them is 10 kids get raped. The other is 5 kids get raped. This wasn't, whoa, I'm a wacky dude, lol so random, extreme hypotheticals.
I really don't blame people for thinking less of me for that clip. It's just really bad, you know.
Yep. And when you include the context, though, it's not because of how it was clipped.
If nothing else, my hope, like this is the goal that I'm trying to convey.
Oh, here he goes again, his greatest flaw. He just tells you what he wants. He goes through all the rigmarole of presenting things in the optimal way to mislead, to obfuscate. And then he'll just tell you, hey, I'm trying to manipulate you. It's so weird. I remember, because I do read comments. I scroll through. I don't necessarily fully read all of them. I don't reply to all of them, certainly. I had someone ask, what could he have done to not present things in a way that would be viewed as manipulative immediately? Just be straight up. Don't give me a 10-minute winding bullshit round the houses excuse saga. If he didn't know what people found wrong with it, he wouldn't have cut that part out when he was quoting himself. See, I'll say it again. For him, the problem is too much context. He's someone who has been hypercritical of other people's framing, so we know he's hyper-aware of framing, so we can assume that he's careful about his own framing. It's fair game, and I think it's probably correct to assume that he is engaging in some very meticulous framing here. He can't win from the whole picture being shown. He can only win from only the opposite to the full-on hater picture being shown. An equal or greater level of deception in the opposite direction. Where were we? Back to what he wants us to do.
Don't judge me for any kind of like paraphilic interpolation of this. Judge me for being a fucking idiot. That's what I want you to do.
Here's Vaush's offer. He'll allow you to call him an idiot in return for you agreeing not to think he has fucked up views on kids and adults, whether that's to do with some sort of desire or just being intensely misguided. But here's the thing, and I think this is the most important thing about situations like this. This is what really matters. Why the fuck should I care about some weird dude on the internet? That's his job. His entire profession is image, and we know he's aware of this even. He says it over and over and over again, how he strategizes to be viewed as good. Now, what I've just said, of course, encompasses people like me as well, but I think there's a good way to go about it and a bad way to go about it. Doing stuff you think is cool and fun, saying things you think are right maybe, saying things you think are exciting and interesting. Cool. Mind fucking your audience. Not cool with me. Hopefully you've enjoyed listening to this, even if it is just background noise while you play a game or do something else. But I want to let this stand as an example of the futility of responding point by point to a calculated lolly festo like this. Getting into the nitty-gritty, following demands that you include full context. You're smearing Dr. Peterson. You must respond to the entirety of his academic output if you wish to make fun of a tweet. Just an endless bog of wank to wade through. But controversy's simmering, you make a nice, decently length video about it, maybe use the person's face in a thumbnail, get a bunch of views, make some money. As a rule, if it follows that people do this, the outcome will overall be positive, and so I must. But, as usual, that's just another one of my harmful opinions.